Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Why We Podcast, where attorneys, accountants, coaches, and consultants share how their show helps. We like to produce a show just about every week, Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern. It is streamed live on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, and then you can listen to this and prior episodes on your favorite podcast platform, be it Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or what I listen to, Stitcher. But I think it's also available on iHeartRadio as well. So feel free to subscribe so that you can catch future episodes, but definitely give us your reviews and downloads for the prior episodes as well. Every week, we like to bring together 2 or 3 other podcast hosts for them to share why they podcast. The reason I do this show is very selfish. I'm sure as an audience, for you listening and viewing, you will definitely learn a lot from Meilin and from David, but I'm going to learn a lot. And that's why I do this show. I'm looking forward for them benefiting as well, because I think these kind of shows can also benefit guests. But again, it is a selfish project for me because I am not only the host here of this program, but I'm the co-founder of Video Socials. We are a business community of attorneys and accountants, coaches, and consultants. We come together in our video blogging clubs to record together fun and done, different topics of video blogs, but also podcast promos. And you'll learn about our podcast services a little bit later in the program. But let's dive in and learn from David and Meilin why they podcast. David, can you share a little bit about what you do professionally? And then we'll segue into how and why your podcast got started.
Absolutely. So I'm a professional musician coach. I have a business called Music Entrepreneur HQ, and it has spawned other side businesses and programs for musicians. So we created an online academy this last year called Elite Players All Access Pass. And I just help musicians find the success they're looking for in an age when musicians will leave school knowing how to play their instrument or sight read or compose or sing, but not have a clue how to start a viral marketing campaign or get into publishing or digital marketing, setting up a website, social media. And so I just caused breakthroughs in musicians' careers.
So that's really cool. So Meilin, before we get to you, David, a little bit more. So you mentioned a little bit, so you kind of answered the question, but I want to parse that a little bit. So where are they in their career and what kind of musician? You kind of mentioned so they could be instrumentalists, but they could also be singers. They could be on either side of the microphone, so to speak, right? They could be the performer, but it sounds like maybe they could also be kind of behind the scenes, like, in publishing, et cetera. So can you share with us who specifically you consider the right fit for your academy?
Yeah, generally the right fit is somebody who has something in motion already.
Okay.
So complete beginners may or may not benefit from what I have to share.
Complete beginner meaning they're obviously not a beginner in terms of learning an instrument, but you mean even beginning of a music career is not really the right fit?
Yeah, because the first 10 years of a music career, or I would say at least the first 5 to 7 years, are just grinding it out, going out, playing live, gaining experiences, getting better at your craft and what you do. The demographic that we often serve is frustrated musicians, like people who've tried a bit of everything. I tried this, I tried that. I'm well studied. I've read books. I've listened to podcasts. I've watched videos, and I'm still just not where I want to be in my career. The result to effort ratio doesn't really seem to be married. It's not matching up properly. And so a lot of people who come to me, they could be solo artists, they could be bands or duos, they could be singers. Anybody who's looking to really advance their career, session musicians, tribute acts. I've worked in a variety of capacities in the industry myself, so I can share that knowledge and experience with them to further their careers.
So now, are they working with you one-on-one, or are they working through kind of a self-study course through the academy? How does that work?
Yeah, the top tier program does offer personalized coaching for each of those musicians. And I do some consulting as well. So if they want to hire me independently outside of the academy, they can do that too. But at the top tier program, I do offer personalized coaching ongoingly to help them parse opportunity and figure out where they want to go and what's maybe stopping them and next steps they could take to get to where they want to go.
Cool. David, we're going to get to how you transitioned and how and why you started the podcast, but I want to hear from Meilin. Meilin, can you share with us a little bit what you do professionally, but even before hosting your own show?
Yeah, I'm a mix. I brought a few professions together. I've studied business, was a landscape architect, and developed my art side. And I've learned throughout the time that I concentrate on energy, and then I found the shamanism, and so I'm bringing out wisdom. So I share wisdom for people that are already teachers or coaches, multifaceted creators. Yeah, they all have a way of bringing all of their life experience together, are interested in expressing their own knowledge within themselves, and also then create an impact in the world and make it a more beautiful place for all of us. And so they appear here and there. So I work one-on-one, right? Because we're so unique, and there's an interest in showing more of oneself, because that enriches then also how we're heard and how we present ourselves, and even it supports us in inviting others to work with us. That's the big one at the end.
So when you work one-on-one, how does that program happen? Is it for a finite amount of time, or do you feel that it's ongoing because there's always something to work on? How is that program?
No, it's really interesting. I've learned because I'm a connector. I connect people up to the cosmos, I always say, down to our beautiful planet. And when it comes together, then you can express it out through your body into the world. So sometimes 3 times is really the most I need. And then if there's interest in the ancient wisdom, right? How do I become more of a sorcerer? What is there that I haven't learned yet? How do I get the knowledge to live much longer, right? There are then these little traits that I have experienced over my life, have met the right people, that they just showed up in my life and I studied with them. And that wisdom I give on to others as well.
So it doesn't need to
then
be.
It's a little bit more long term.
So then it can be long term, but it can be, you're saying, even within 3 sessions. So that's a pretty short amount of time.
That's my interest. I love speed, and if the intention and focus, I always say I like to be like a Gandalfina. Boom, done. That's
really
always
cool.
My goal.
And how do you work with people? Is it always in person? Is it remotely nowadays with Zoom and things of that nature? What's the modality like?
I started out online about 11 years ago.
Sure.
And then I ventured out more to be in personal contact, because I'm a physical channel also. I'm different beings. Then in a room, you can sense the energy a little different, and you play off others. But now the last few years, again, it was one-on-one. But I'm missing the retreat way, in person too. So I'm starting to put my feelers out again as we are able to travel more again.
Good for you. Before we get to like how David transitioned and created a show, Meilin, can you share how and when did you start your podcast and why?
That's a story. In 2012, suddenly I started singing. I was at a trade show, and sounds came out as I was helping a friend in her booth.
You said 2012?
And then I thought, oh, people responded to those sounds. And then I thought, oh, I want to be courageous and share that with the world. So I started conference calls at those time, right?
So this is 2012. You said was that
yeah,
year?
Genau. And then first I did it with friends to be courageous enough and see if people are interested. And so I learned that I speak a lot, and then I anchor things with sounds. And then I thought, oh, then I can do it in English. So Facebook was supportive. And then I thought, maybe a radio show. And then someone showed up where I could do my work non-censored, with no commercial, because I never knew when I was someone else. And I did that show for 7 years. A weekly
Where was that show?
Vancouver.
Where was it? In Vancouver. Okay.
Called Sacred Sound Surprises, where people could call in. That was my vision, and write in, and I could do healing, speaking, and singing all at once. I loved and still love to do that. And so I honed my style. In the meantime, then the interviews over Facebook Lives appeared. did a lot of videos. So then I thought, but now I want a podcast where I have a stronger connection to the audience and the guests. And so I created a mix in my podcast where I highlight others, and then sometimes it's my style, and other times people come in where they can ask me whatever they desire.
So how do you highlight others? What do you mean by that?
I go into conversation with them and see what comes and wants to be spoken about in the moment, especially when we two come together. What is special of our connection?
Cool. Yeah, I want to hear a little bit more about, especially how you're bringing the people together, the community that you've created, that interaction. Though I don't want to miss out on David's creation story, as it were. David, how did your podcast get started?
Well, I'm sure you're starting to gather that before I was a podcaster, I was a musician, and I'm still a musician.
Yeah, I was afraid to put you on the spot and kind of call you out. Are you a musician or not? You know,
right?
Sometimes, a barber can be bald, so
sometimes, right?
So, you are a musician. And what kind of musician?
I play guitar and bass and sing, and I also produce all kinds of music. So there was this growing awareness at the time, and it was 2009, that there's all these new platforms out there. And of course, MySpace was still kind of popular at the time, but starting to die, and everyone's moving over to Facebook. There's just so many publishing channels and social networks, and that's exploded in the last 10 years or so.
Sure.
But in 2009, there were already all these new channels, and I thought, well, podcasting could be one more way that people discover what I'm doing out there in terms of music. And so I just started off as David Angel Wiebe Podcast, and within 2 episodes, I had my friend, who is also a singer-songwriter, reach out to me, really young guy at the time. I think he was 14 or 15. And he said, podcast, what a great idea. Why don't you have me on your show? So before I knew it, I was doing interviews. And I took a little bit of a break in 2015, finished my book, came back to podcasting in 2016, refreshed and ready to get going again. And so that's the current show that I have, the New Music Industry Podcast.
So with the New Music Industry Podcast, what's the format like? And Meilin kind of gave us a little bit of that very, very interesting aspect of her show. I want to go more into that. David, how do you format your show?
Yeah, so the promise from day one, when I recorded episode 0, just to introduce the show, was I'm going to be doing solo episodes, I'm going to be doing interviews, and I'm going to be interviewed by others. And so we've kept to that promise, and we've even brought on marketers from outside of the music business to share their expertise on LinkedIn or setting up a membership site or course or what have you. And that's been the format ever since. So we've adapted.
So is every episode having all 3 segments, or one episode maybe you being interviewed, or another episode being a solo, and another episode maybe an interview show? What do you mean?
Right. Yeah, it's basically the latter. Yeah, so it rotates through different formats.
How often do you come out with episodes?
Weekly, and briefly we moved to a monthly format, and it's sometimes unusual that we do sometimes take a break or just go to a complete stop to retool the show and come back.
Sure.
So that's happened a couple times too.
Yeah. So how do you find your guests? How do you know the guest is the right fit for your music audience, your musician audience?
Yeah, there's so many opportunities coming through in my inbox. And my original intention was just to, since the podcast was named after the book, The New Music Industry, I thought I would interview everyone that I mentioned in here, all my heroes, all the people I looked up to and learned from. And that's how it got started. But before I knew it, all these opportunities started showing up in my inbox. Cool. So then it became a process of reviewing the information, seeing whether or not I wanted to have that conversation about the topic that they brought up, and then invite them to be on the show. But I'm always on the lookout for, again, my heroes, the people that inspired me to be a part of the show too.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing, right? About Meilin, I'm sure you would agree, like that having a podcast basically gives you a platform. It's very enticing where you can interview your heroes, to put it that way, or your VIP relationships. And it's a great way of meeting new people. It's a wonderful compliment to open up a conversation or open up a relationship with someone that you don't know, where you're asking to interview them and to feature them on your show, on your platform, and essentially to promote them to your audience. Hopefully they'll also promote their episode to their circle. Usually people do. But to open up the conversation that way, David, I can imagine that it's a really cool way, let alone, of course, it sounds like you already interviewed them to some degree with your book. How do you intertwine and interweave your book with your show? Like, is there any kind of call to action? What's the weaving like?
I would say it was a little more obvious early on. So I
Okay.
would go through the book kind of chapter by chapter,
Okay,
take
yeah.
pieces out and talk about them,
Cool,
which is
yeah.
similar to what people like Russell Brunson do sometimes.
Sure, right.
Because they've documented everything that they know and have done inside their book.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there were call to actions as well. But before I knew it, I was on to book number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and new courses and the online academy. So over the years, you know, the main connection has been, I sometimes refer back to the book and bring it up. But aside from that, just the title of the show.
How has the response been? And I'm going to ask you the same thing, Meilin. How has that response been from your audience? Has anyone shared stories or examples where they've benefited directly from the podcast, let alone from the academy? Like, has anything like that happened?
Yeah, some really cool stuff has happened pretty early on. There is a musician, and his name's Joao, so he's Portuguese, if I understand correctly. And so he was listening to the show. He's getting inspired as a musician, but he kind of made this fun little transition where he went in a little bit of an entrepreneurial direction. So he actually went door knocking at a label that he didn't have any prior, like a music label, he didn't have any prior contact with. And within about a year or two, they recognized his ability to make really great videos, and he kind of became a freelance videographer for them. So it's really cool to see him evolve that way and get to unleash his talents in a really creative capacity.
That's really cool. Yeah, to showcase that kind of example, right? I mean, it takes a little bit of initiative. I think in any industry, I don't know the music industry myself, so I'm afraid to provide any conjecture, but I can imagine in any industry, it takes, you know, that knocking on doors, literally or figuratively, and putting yourself out there in that kind of initiative. Meilin, have you heard from your audience any examples where they've directly benefited from your show? Has that happened for you yet?
Oh yeah, like, the most touching ones are those when I think sometimes, oh, Meilin, what have I spoken about? No one is going to be interested in it, right? Because I post Sundays. I said that out 2 years ago. But what happened that the Sundays, that's where I record my solo shows, really also on the Sunday just before I post, to have really the energy of the day go out there, or the topic, or whatever day it's, you know, sometimes we have these special days. And so I think that sometimes it's like a little self-censoring. And then people write back, oh my God, I just had to hear this. Oh, this was so inspiring. And then it's, oh my God, it worked. And it still surprised me after 10 years. So,
good for you.
You know,
yeah,
doing videos.
It affirms that, you know, we're not just putting it out there, right? We want that feedback. We need that feedback to know that we are making that impact.
It's much more fun. And it touches me deeply when I read that or I hear that from someone. Sometimes it comes a bit later, or then I know, oh my God, she has listened now for a year, every single app, and you see it. Sometimes, you know, you recognize certain cities or something. You know it's the same person, and then they're quiet, and then suddenly say, oh, I'm from this and this country, and then I say, oh my God, yeah, now a face or a voice to a listener. That is really fascinating. And then I have you know, like a little group where they can come also on Facebook and say hello and what they desire, or I may be live in as well. And they can share a little bit about themselves.
Meilin, that was going to be my next question. And likewise with David, but for you, Meilin, so talk to us about that Facebook group. How is that a community for your podcast? What do you do with it? And how do people interact? And
yeah, it depends. Nowadays, I've been a little silent and introvert. It's just the energies at the moment. There's a way of, and David has spoken about it. There's always a time of fine tuning, of getting out more of who we are, to get more precise, with more clear intention. So I have been a little silent, so not so much on Facebook, but it's picking up again because spring starts. And yeah, at least they have the posting of the week, because I also have a video or audio, and then they have all outlets and one spot. They don't have to roam around, and or I invite. But then I just had a cool dude. He created a Zippy stream, right, where you also have connections. You can write newsletters because you get people's emails addresses,
Sure.
and you can write them back and they then answer. That's another community. And now even creating a larger community, like David is going to create an academy, a membership, because I've been speaking about that already on my radio show for the last 5-6 years, that this is now the time where we have to come together,
Right.
and to really create the change we all desire.
Yeah. Yeah. For us, that community is central. I like that you were being candid, Meilin, because none of us are perfect at this, right? It's kind of one of the things I wanted this show to be, where not only are the two of you kind of learning and hearing ideas from each other, the audience likewise does the same. I do the same. Our Facebook group is relatively new, though I'm on Facebook all the time, just socially, though it never dawned on me to have a Facebook group until I started hearing that's what other podcast hosts do. I'm like, oh, of course I should have a podcast. Of course I should have a Facebook group for the show. Silly. So it takes a while for us to kind of get around to things. And as David said, and you also said, Meilin, that there is that ebb and flow of energy, either literally or figuratively, the feeling of it, where not everything takes off right away, but it's part of the ecosystem and part of the process. But let alone there's the video socials community in general for our video blogging, and our podcast hosts come together once a month, which I'll tell you guys about a little bit later. David, talk to us about the Academy. What are the tiers like? How do people get started there, where they're listening to the show, they get inspired, they're in that demographic, unfortunately they're in that frustration as well, where they're in that level of their career, maybe they've plateaued and not quite taken off the way they wanted to as a music career, and they get inspired by the show, and they know they're kind of all dressed up somewhere to go. The Academy sounds like that's the place to go. What is that entree? Is there what are the levels? How do people get to know that? And has someone walked through that process already, where they were a listener and they kind of went through the tiers of your Academy?
Excellent question. We have a module inside the membership that's a Start Here module.
Okay.
Wanted to make sure we created that because we knew we had a lot of content to share. Sure. And so there's 3 courses in there and a forum. And that's just really the starting point. There's members only audios, there's archived content from stuff we created in the past that's still really good but no longer supported. There's additional tools, there's shows. So we get the new music industry podcast inside there. So we wanted to make sure, just to make it clear, hey, first thing, introduce yourself in the forum. We'd like to get to know you and who you are and what you're up to, and maybe start pitching into the discussion so that we can get you to where you want to go. We don't want to. You're paying a fee to be here, and we respect that and we appreciate that, and we want to help you get results, even if it's some quick wins, and then long term, sure, we can help you achieve some bigger wins. And from there, we recommend which order to take the courses in, to just so that they get the best results possible from that as well. You wouldn't want to just, some people are going to do what they want to do, and that's okay too. Some people are just going to say, I want this course, that's what I came here for, so I'm just going to go and take that now. But yeah, as much as possible, we're encouraging people getting into the forum and then going through the courses in an order, and then signing up to receive some physical goods from us, like books and newsletters and stuff like that. And so I've had a few people in there, either on a beta basis or on a customer basis. And really the biggest thing that's come back is just like, this is a treasure trove of really amazing, incredible content, which is sort of what we've been hearing from day one. And it's probably what I'm best known for, is creating loads of content and sharing it and getting it out there and adding value to people. And so that's really the number one thing we've heard. It's like, this thing is so good already, and it's just going to keep getting better.
Is there a free tier or free trial or a foot in the door level?
That's a terrific question. We wanted to set up something like that and not have it be too complicated, because we have so many sales funnels and modules and, sure, newsletters and stuff already. So what we did was we created a $1 14-day trial for all people, right, who want to have a look inside.
So and now that gives them a taste, and of course from there they can of course upgrade and move forward. So that's really powerful. So Meilin, do you have anything like that? What is that transition like when someone gets inspired by your show? What is that transition like for them to start working with you? And you work exclusively one-on-one, it sounds like, right? Do you have any kind of group program, but it's one-on-one,
Yeah, because I
which
have,
means it's a limited. Go on.
No, the group never really takes off. Sometimes I do a group Zoom if there's special days and I feel inspired, and they say, come, yeah, everyone, here's the Zoom link, and you watch it also on Facebook.
Sure.
And because of the radio show that I always had, and now the podcast, that is already more like a group. And for me,
what
it
is that
never
transition
works
like?
unless it's a workshop where somehow then the right people always come together in person. I've seen.
Yeah.
Then I like it because it feeds off each other. But if I like the intensity and the depth and in an individual work, because I also do write songs, right, to center whatever needs to be brought in, or we go into a ritual, and I like that it is a more enveloping. That's how I like to work.
That's really neat. So when someone listens to the podcast, is there an actual invitation to start working with you?
No, I normally
you don't do
say
that.
come to the Facebook group. People reach out. I've learned that. I don't have to say. I'm lucky, my group Spirit will tell them, work with her, she has the answers. And I've learned that. So people come knowing they maybe ask me how much it is or something. And
sure. But your call to action, to put it that way, is the Facebook group.
It's not now, but it's later. And then I say, when the right time, you will be there. So I have there's this ultimate trust in when the time is right, when it needs to be done, it will be done. That's my philosophy. And
so I have a follow-up question for you, David, that I forgot to ask that I want to hear the answer to. But before I get there, Meilin, while we're chatting, do you have guests as well? I know you mentioned that it's very interactive. Your show is a pretty cool format, it sounds like. Do you also interview guests in a much more How do you vet them? How do you know they're the right fit for your type of work and your type of audience?
I have a sense. It goes back to that trust. How do I even meet that person? I'm surprised. You show up and say, oh, and then I just write, would you like to be on my podcast title? And then they say yes. They have the same, they just sense it. And that's how I invited. There are many authors that come, and I make sure I read the book. That's very important for me. And I was really surprised. I had a Pulitzer Prize nominee, and he said, "I'm the first podcaster who even read the book." I said, "Oh my God, they didn't read the book." It's really, I need to be really close. I think that so we can highlight each other and bring out the best in each other. And if we bring out the best in each other, because then I also have a feeling for who I'm talking to, it also brings out strengths and inspiration in the audience. And I really like to meet them also first. I've stopped just letting them on so you can promote. This is
so you do a vetting introduction pre-call.
Come on,
yeah.
And you have to have the same, or maybe it's also the title Oneness, right? So your work, if you work with the intention of creating beautiful change on this planet for us, for nature, or for animals, right? You come anyway already with a different intention. You have a desire to be yourself and show that to the audience and to impact them anyway. Mm-hmm.
That is tremendous. Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that you also have that introductory call also helps that you guys are on the same wavelength and energy level. So that makes it really powerful. David, from a very practical question I had, if you're willing to share, what do you host your academy on technologically? Like, where did you build it out?
Yeah, that's actually a really excellent question, and a thing that we took really seriously, because we looked at a lot of different options through the years.
There's so many.
Yeah, WordPress had wish list, and it looked pretty solid, and then there was ClickFunnels. but nothing quite worked out for us. And we tried free solutions, we tried paid solutions.
Sure.
The thing that came along that I had an opportunity to check out, because I'm subscribed to James Schramko, Super Fast Business newsletter, is 10x Pro. So that's something that kind of built with his partner, John Lint, or John Lint's the founder and creator of the software. But
so the software is called 10x Pro.
10x Pro, yeah.
Pro, Pro.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And it's the easiest membership site, course builder,
learning management system,
campaign builder.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it does everything. Affiliate dashboard. It does all of it.
All right, cool. Yeah, I want that. Thank you for sharing that perspective. In a moment, we're going to take a quick commercial break since I'm the first advertiser of the show. And then I'd love for each of you to share. I don't know. I'm a podcast junkie. I listen to podcasts all the time, as you can imagine. That's why I do the show. That's why I like having a show and interviewing you guys. I'd love to hear from you after the quick 1 minute break. Who you're a raving fan of another podcast that you listen to or watch, and why you're a raving fan of theirs. So let's take a quick commercial break so you can learn a little bit more about why I do this show and how we work with show hosts, as well as people who are looking to have their own show. And then we'll come back. I'm looking forward to hearing about the shows that you listen to.
Do you want your own podcast like this one? My team will do all the grunt work for you. Just show up, smile, and enjoy talking to your potential clients and referral relationships. Go to videosocials.net/govip to watch our 9-minute webinar for all the details. Are you a busy lawyer, coach, consultant like me? You should have a podcast done for you to get you more clients, impress your colleagues, and it becomes your perpetual referrals flywheel. We find you the right guests. We schedule your guests, handle all the podcast tech, get you into Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and more. Done for you. Go to videosocials.net/govip to watch our 9-minute webinar for all the details. Now back to the show.
And back to our show. David, I want also for people, before we actually even forget, right after you tell me about one of your favorite podcast hosts, for you to actually share how people can listen to your show. So we have not forgotten that. So David, are you a fan of another show, and why?
There's just so many, so I'm going to try to rattle off a few very quickly. In terms of business, I love James Schramko's Super Fast Business. In terms of marketing, Dan Kennedy, Magnetic Marketing. I've been listening to that one a lot lately. In terms
Is there a podcast host that you know well that you would want to spotlight?
I mean, I know James pretty well. He's been my business coach all these years.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've considered him that even when I'm not part of the membership. I've been in and out of the membership, but I would still consider him, a coach.
Oh, that's awesome. And of course, Dan Kennedy is great. And did you have a third one? Did I cut you off?
Yeah, I did have a third one that I thought of. Todd Henry, who I've also had a chance to interview many years ago, Accidental Creative. So that's for the create on demand world. And
is it Accidental Creative? Can it also refer to your kind of audience in that sense of creatives and musicians?
There might be a little bit of overlap, and it might explain why I've had him on.
All right, good. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's really cool. Meilin, what about you? Are you a raving fan of any hosts that you know well?
Raving fans. I'm trying to remember the last name. It's
well, do you remember the name of the show? I don't.
Yeah, no, I'm so bad. I'm such a visual girl. I do have to listen now to a German one that I like a lot, because she comes out of Switzerland, because it's called Fakeless Elite from Claudia. And because she talks about things a lot of people don't want to talk about, and she goes deep into the topic and pulls out the right question. Yeah.
So that's why
it's in German. But you have a global audience.
We do have a global audience, and that's fine. That's fair. That's in German. As much as I won't be able to appreciate the show directly, I can appreciate the reason why she does it. I'm looking forward to getting to know why she has her own podcast. David, how can people?
She speaks also English and wants to go more into English, so I'll send her your way.
Yeah, well, there you go. This could be a nice segue. That would be cool. Yeah, she would have to do it in English because I don't know any German. So that's great. David, where and how can people watch the show, listen to the show, and get a hold of you?
Yeah, you should be able to find it just about anywhere that you subscribe to podcatchers, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Obviously, we upload all of our episodes to YouTube as well. So you name it, we're probably there.
And again, the name of the show is
the new Music Industry Podcast.
So if someone types in New Music Industry Podcast into YouTube or their favorite podcast platform, they'll easily find it.
Typically, you might have to type in David.
Maybe they'll type in your name.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. They'll get in, then they can subscribe. That's really great. Meilin, what about you? How can people get a hold of your show?
Yeah, moving to Oneness. It's on every outlet, podcast outlet, and also on YouTube. Because I have the videos. Often we speak about that. You have to go look for a second at this minute and look at her painting or something behind my guest, or the book cover, because it's multidimensional. Even it's in a podcast and you speak, the visuals also share so many nuggets sometimes. So I move people back and forth.
I'm a fan of it being a video podcast. I remember originally looking to do the same type of podcast in a car, very Russell Brunson, like how he started. I like the video aspect, especially because you're able to then unlock the channels of YouTube and social media where audio only doesn't really play so well in the social media world. So, Clubhouse being an exception. So I like the fact that both of you kind of do a video version, but then of course the traditional podcast platforms. So just about once a week, they can find it on all the podcast platforms, Meilin?
Yeah, once a week.
That's great. Is there anything that I left out that I didn't ask you guys that you wanted to share of why you podcast and the benefits of it to others? David, Meilin?
Yeah, I would share it enriches us. Again, it builds community. Now, even the guests, you stay together with them. So if you get someone that functions with you, that you really care about, and also, I'm sometimes surprised who finds me.
Right, right.
So there is a reason why certain people come onto our podcast or want to speak with us or spend their time with us. And I think that's very precious. And we can build on that. And sometimes it is within a few days, a few weeks, or a few years where it comes around and you can collaborate or support each other.
So Sarah backstage is telling me that if we Googled your podcast names, it takes over the first page. So from a search engine optimization standpoint, you could thank your team for doing the right thing for your show.
I'm the team.
Pat yourself on the back. That's tremendous. Do you guys know about our show host networking events that happen every month? Like March 31st.
I signed up for the first one.
You're both coming. All right, great. So, okay, good. I want to make sure that you guys knew about it before I even talk about it to the audience. So just about every month, and we've been doing it now for 4 months, it's the last Thursday of the month. We bring together dozens of podcast hosts and live streamers, people who have interview shows. So you out there listening, watching, if you've ever thought about hosting your own show, or of course, if you already do host your own show and you like being a guest on other people's shows, you're going to be able to introduce yourself to dozens of podcast hosts. I think the number is up to like 80 or so for March 31st at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then the last Thursday in April is April 28th, 1 p.m. Eastern. It's on Zoom. We do breakout rooms. It's a lot of fun. It's really productive where people literally get interviews on other people's shows wherever there's a fit. There's not a lot of swapping going on, which is we don't really encourage per se. We're not against it, but it's not really for you to be like, I'll be on your show, you be on my show. If that's possible, great. But sometimes it's not a fit, right? Like I'm not an appropriate guest for someone else, but they are an appropriate guest for my show, especially if they host an interview podcast, case in point. So I'm happy that both of you are coming to the event, and for everyone else out there, last Thursday of the month, you go to videosocials.net/showhosts, all plural. So videosocialsplural.net/showhosts, and you can RSVP. It's of course free, and you get to know our community that way. Again, this has been another episode of Why We Podcast. My name is Vik Rajan. You can watch the show and previous episodes on YouTube. Our LinkedIn, Facebook is relatively easy to find, of course, on all the podcast platforms, as both of them have mentioned, from Apple Podcasts to Google Podcasts, Spotify, and my favorite, Stitcher. Thank you, David. Thank you, Meilin, for being part of Why You Podcast.
Thank you so much.
All right. Until
Thank
next
you
time.
very much, Vikram, for having us and organizing this.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to you guys getting to know each other. Especially there is that musical element.
Yeah,
to
I
both
thought
of you,
that was
obviously,
fun,
right?
and also
So that was a pretty
membership
cool
and
theme.
community.
That was not expected, but I'm happy that we found that common thread. Music does bring people together. So here we are.
Yes,
Yeah,
it does.
it does.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.